Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick welcoming you to another episode of VETChat, the UK's #1 veterinary podcast. And really pleased to have Roger Longden with me today. Roger will not be known by many of you. He's not in the veterinary world, but I had a thoroughly interesting and enjoyable conversation with him at a recent event in Manchester with KPMG. KPMG sort of encouraging us all to be part of that northern powerhouse.
Indeed.
We will see how that develops in the next 4 or 5 years as well. I do remember seeing Transport for London saying they were levelling up the north, and they just meant the north of the London sort of underground. So we
Yes.
don't want the Southerners taking this phrase from us. You know, if we're going to be levelling up, hopefully it's going to go past the Watford Gap and Birmingham and beyond.
Amen to
But
that.
Roger, really interesting guy, the founder of Derby Giants. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But basically, Roger is trying to unlock and accelerate outcomes for leaders in the Northwest. From Manchester, I'm from Liverpool. We got on. We didn't talk that much about football, which always helps. And I think it's interesting with the Liverpool and Manchester thing, because there's obviously a lot of rivalry with the football teams.
Yeah.
I think there's some rivalry with the cities. But actually, particularly in the sort of tech area, it's so much better for us to actually collaborate, isn't it? And it was nice to see the two mayors, Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, getting on. And I think we're probably stronger if we work together rather than
100%. Yeah.
compete, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Great to be with you, Anthony. And yes, I have always believed on many, many levels that we are all stronger together. And whether that goes from, good grief, I'm kind of revealing my sort of left-leaning roots here, whether that goes from sort of trade union representative, and I say that as a business owner,
Yeah.
through to, whether we're talking international geopolitics. Yeah. So you can pull resources, you can get, from an economic point of view, you can get the economies of scale. But what comes with that is also greater influence as well, if you can all be aligned. And actually, funnily enough, alignment is a huge part of our work. So that ethos around stronger together is actually,
Yeah.
an organization is stronger when everybody is together. And that's not always the case. That's not always the case that everyone's together. So yeah, 100% with you on that.
So background very much being in business. I think your degree was in business and marketing and HR, wasn't it? And they're
Yes.
three incredibly important elements of any successful business, aren't they?
I had a bit of an unconventional route through university because I left school and originally wanted to teach, and I was training as a business studies and economics teacher. So it was kind of a business degree and a teaching degree, but the course was in two halves, and I did the first 2 years and then thought, I fancy a bit of a break. I fancy a year out. Of course, I never
Yeah.
went back. So I was able to then. I actually took a bit of a left turn at that point because I started working in the care sector. I was working with young people who were in the care of local authorities, and I did that for about 7 or 8 years. But then decided, oh, actually, I did want to go back to business. So I picked up my studies and sort of continued with the business element, and finished that off part time, whilst sort of getting my feet into the commercial sector, and joined what was then, this is going to cast memories back for a few people, what was then ICL, the big computer,
Yeah.
UK computing giant. And I joined really as an administrator, and I was there for best part of about 14 years. It went through a number of different iterations. It transformed into Fujitsu, although I know that's a bit of a toxic name, given the news over the past 12 to 18 months, and worked my way up through to. It's funny you talk about the rivalry between Liverpool and Manchester. My main base, whilst I worked in that organisation, was Warrington, which, for those who are not local to the Northwest, is pretty much halfway.
Yeah.
It's almost like that no man's land between the two. And it used to get quite tribal if if you had teams from teams from Liverpool playing teams from Manchester, it would get quite tribal and quite interesting. But yeah, I worked in sales, I worked in engineering, I worked in operations management, I worked in worked on bids for winning large contracts, a whole, and eventually I finished. I took redundancy from the organisation at the end of 2009 when we saw the crash come in 2008.
Yeah.
I could see it coming a mile off, and I thought, right, I'm going to get everything that I need to kind of set myself up when to work for myself when I left the business. And the organisation had a very strong coaching ethos, and they used to keep a pool of internal coaches themselves, which we used to get deployed around the business for people who had coaching requirements. And in order to become a member of that particular pool, they put you through a very, very comprehensive postgraduate training program at Henley Business School,
Yeah.
which was transformative. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. So I made sure I got onto that before I took redundancy, and then after that, just kind of started 2010. I remember the January 2010 when the snow was like 2 foot deep and everybody was, pipes were frozen and everybody was snowed in for 2 weeks. And there's me trying to start a business,
Yeah.
trying to start it by myself. And at that point, I was just like, let's just work as a coach. All I want to do is just earn enough money to pay the bills and do work I enjoy. But you kind of get to the top of that hill, and then you see the next hill, which looks a little bit more interesting, and you think, "Oh, all right, let's try for that one." And
Hmm.
then and eventually, once you've done that a few times, and you plot a line that joins up all the summits, you actually realise that you have been going, on a sort of growth path unknowingly. I never sat there and thought, "I've got this big hairy goal." And I really want to drive to have an internationally renowned business that specializes in its particular field, that is successful, and so on and so forth. And lo and behold, that's where we've ended up. So kind of, I wouldn't say it was by accident, but it certainly wasn't by absolute intention right from the outset, I would say.
With all of the, talking about unlocking and accelerating outcomes for leaders and founders,
Yeah.
planning is important, but then very rarely, I think Montgomery said or no, I think it was Eisenhower said, planning is important, but most planning is rubbish because it fails once you face the enemy. So,
Yeah.
did you write a lot of stuff down when you ink it? Does that make you more committed to it, or
It's a really good question, because in today's day and age, with the amount of turbulence and volatility that we face as business leaders, week in, week out, day in, day out, where's the I really challenge the value in writing a detailed, I say detailed,
yes,
5-year business plan.
yeah,
What I think there is value in doing is being very clear on the endpoints that you're aiming for, and then being very clear about the waypoints that will help you assess that you're on the right path towards that endpoint. But getting really detailed about the steps that you're going to take between those waypoints, I think, is falls exactly into what you said there. Many plans really kind of fall apart when they come into contact with reality.
yeah,
So in the approach that we take, agile is a term that's been thrown around for 15 years plus now. So I don't want to kind of use that as to jump on that bandwagon, but the principle of it absolutely is 100% relevant to how you should approach planning in business now. For many years, agile was just the preserve of projects. We
yeah,
help our clients apply the principles of agile to the way that they develop and plan and execute their strategy. And so you end up with the details on a very for the more immediate term. So could be could be the next 3 months, the next 4 months. But the point is, you you do still know where you want to be in 5 years, and you know where you want to be at the end of 12 months. But the only bit that you've really planned out is what's happening in the next 3 to 4 months,
yeah,
because the chances are, You'll learn something in that first 3 to 4 months that then will change the steps you take, the route you want to follow in the next 3 to 4 months. So you've got that opportunity for iterative improvement. If you sit down and you intricately plan out what's going to happen in the next 12 months, for most businesses, most organizations which run at a fairly fast pace these days, then that's actually quite a wasteful practice, because the chances are by the time you've got through your first 3 to 4 months, the rest of it has to be rewritten because something external's happened or something internal has happened, which means that you've learned and you want to, slightly change course. So, absolutely all for being clear on the endpoints and the waypoints towards that, but not a fan of getting really detailed on every single step that needs to be taken between those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Roger. And I think change is happening so quickly now that if you're planning for 3 to 5 years, the actual mindset will be completely different because of technology and all the other things,
Yeah.
geopolitics, etc., that will change. We were running a payroll business that was based around IR35, and then we had four different prime ministers who all had different ideas about what IR35 was, and
Yeah.
HMRC scrabbling to understand what everybody wanted. HMRC also in chaos, and businesses then pretty much ignoring IR35. So to carry on for the next 3 years with that business would be stupidity, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Exactly, exactly. Yeah. It is, you've not just got the political instability, you've got the pace of technology, which is driving many, many things. So yes, 100%.
Looking at we've just been going through a coaching session as well as the business, because Liverpool Metro Mayor has been giving money. Basically, a lot of companies get stuck at a certain stage. How do they go from 1 million to 2 million, 2 million to five, five to
Yeah.
10? And it does require different mindsets, doesn't it? The way you learn to ski by doing snowplow gets you down a hill, but it won't get you down a black slope. You need to
Very
have
true.
different strategies for that.
Yeah.
So, do you think? How do you use that to sort of help people at different stages? Because presumably there are some similarities at the different levels, but there are different ways that you have to work
Yeah.
from being a 1, 2 man business to being a 10 person business.
Yeah. So in my early days when it was just me, I did work with those small micro businesses. I did a lot of work with the tech sector here in Manchester, and that's kind of where I grew the business
Yeah,
out. But I started to work a lot more with founders that were at a pivotal point where they perhaps had reached a certain size. Usually, if you're looking at headcount, usually this was about 20 to 30 people. If you're looking at revenue, it's maybe a million, couple of million, and they often as well they'd receive funding, and so there was an acceleration in it required in the business, if not just from their own expectations, but perhaps from the expectations of funders by that point.
yeah,
So the pressure was on, but the thing was that the founders often didn't have the, like you say, the mindset or the tools or the knowledge to do things differently. So they were still trying to run the business as if they or as they had done right from the word go, and that's where that was the first sort of real transformational sort of intervention point for us, for want of a better phrase, into organisations to help them move, to help give them a different way of kind of defining and what the priorities are, and helping everyone to align into them, understand what their contribution is and how important it is. Um, but without becoming too corporate, without having to write, gazillion policies and have huge amounts of governance and so on and so forth, because a lot of entrepreneurs obviously would run a million miles from that type of thing, because it's completely opposite to how they operate and what they want their businesses to be. So it was kind of answering that challenge of how do you become more mature as a business? How do you make that sort of step change, but without becoming too everything becoming too burdensome for them, you can still keep that sort of light-footedness. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum that we work at. The other end of the spectrum is we actually do a lot of work with corporate clients who have become quite immobile, you might say,
Yeah.
not that responsive. Um,
They
and
move as you get bigger. It's very easy to move slowly, isn't it? And speed is and agility is important.
exactly, they perhaps have found themselves moving at something like a glacial pace, and they need to start to get more responsive, especially if they're in the technology sector.
Yeah,
So they approach us to say, look, can you help us bring some responsiveness, some agility back into how we're working? And essentially, both organisations, whether it's the founder led or whether it's the corporate, want the same thing. But obviously, we have different models of engagement because obviously one has a lot more stakeholders and a lot more people to, get on the bus than a founder
mm,
led business. But yeah, so we kind of work at both ends of the spectrum, still being able to. It's always on transformation though. So what we do is about, it's about accelerating outcomes for businesses, and 90% of the time, those outcomes are transformational in nature. So it's not about how to necessarily run the business better, unless of course the business has been run badly, and the transformation is we're going to get better at it.
yeah.
But for most businesses, it's usually about driving transformation.
We were talking with our coach, the process we're going through at the moment, about Jack Welch's work and the four E's and about energy and energize
Yeah,
um, to actually a bit of edge, but then also to execute as well. It is speed is important, isn't it? Because even in a small organisation, it can be very easy to get involved in committee type decisions, which take months rather
yeah,
than weeks. And I can remember, I think it was a friend from who worked for Google who said, Google used to say, we're going to try and do something in 3 months that most businesses would take a year to do.
exactly, exactly.
It is that speed is so important, isn't it?
100%, 100%. And in many ways, our method that we take clients through um, helps them to do exactly that. You know,
Mm,
I've been working with our approach. I started developing it, using it with those clients initially in the tech sector here in Manchester. So, we pivoted, or I pivoted the business from being a pure coaching business over to the I noticed that it was the performance, the need for performance improvement wasn't necessarily at the individual level, it was more at the organizational level.
yeah,
How do you get everybody, rather than just focus on one person, focus on everyone? Okay.
yeah,
And so, excuse me. Yeah, that's been the main thrust, the main focus of our work since about 2016, to be honest. And you talk about what Jack Welch was saying there, and one of the E's being execution. Well, yeah, but execution doesn't just happen. It's something, particularly with the level of distraction, the level of noise, even in small organizations, whether that be internal or external noise. There's a million and one reasons why once you've set that goal, you can get pulled off track.
very much.
And I kind of bring in um, some of my influences from all the sports that I've done over the years. Rowing being one of them, and it is the routine. Rowing's very much a routine sport because you do the same thing over and over and over and
Yeah,
over
yeah, yeah.
again. But the point is that once you get into that kind of cyclical nature, it becomes the heartbeat, and it also means that you get the opportunity to test something out, like Google will have done, right? Test something out, and if it hasn't worked, you can either learn from it and adapt next time, or kill it and move on.
Yeah,
Yeah, and what we find is that when clients embrace our approach, is that they typically, I mean, you talk about Google in 3 months. What we see typically is that a client that would have taken 12 months to achieve a goal that they set for themselves, usually achieve it in half as long, in 6 months.
Yeah.
So there's the acceleration.
And obviously, to do all of those things, you have to have some sort of benchmark system, some sort of measurement system.
Yeah,
I did eMyth in the mid 2000s, and we talked a lot about key success indices or key performance indices then.
right.
Then I've noticed people like Vern Harnish talking more about OKRs. How do you measure success? Obviously, you can measure it from pounds, shillings, and pence. But what are the other things that you think are important to measuring the success of a business? And I know every business is different, but
Yeah, yeah. So I can talk in general terms here. Like you say, pound, shillings, and pence bottom line measures are always compelling,
yeah,
especially if you've got funders who are going to want to see returns like that. But in many respects, it's about what comes before that, what leads up to that ultimate measure of success. And so this is where you need to get absolutely fanatical about understanding the different types of measures and deploying them at the right time. So you've got your lagging measures, which are your true measures of impact. So you have launched a new product, fine. You know, maybe the number of downloads is a measure of impact, but probably I would have thought it's the revenue that's generated from subscriptions or whatever that might come
yeah,
from that. But there are a number of measures that would lead up to that point that would help you, like I said, talk about waypoints. These could be regarded as waypoints to show that you're on the right track. So, even before you launch, it could be about some sort of measures around testing, perhaps the volume of testing, perhaps the scores that you're getting from as feedback from testers, perhaps the rate at which you're eliminating bugs from it, for instance. I know it's quite a software heavy example I'm giving here, but I think the principles can be applied to a number of different things. Whether you're implementing just a new organizational process, you might want to test it out first. You might want to
yeah,
pilot it first before you let it live across the whole organization. And so the same principle of, the number of testers, the quality of the feedback, how many opportunities for improvement got reported, and how we're getting on with ironing those out. These are all what we call leading measures. So these show that we are on the right track, but they are not the final goal in themselves. Okay.
mm,
And so you've got leading and lagging measures, which are what you use when you have data points available. Sometimes there isn't always data available. And that's where it's tempting and for instance, signature of a new contract.
mm,
You know, that could be really important in terms of obviously winning a business or perhaps signing up a new partner whose services or products you're going to sell. Okay. So, in terms of it being a valid waypoint, the signature of that contract is probably still really important to keep the focus. And that's the point. When you get a measure, it gives you focus. It,
mm,
it becomes a spotlight that draws attention to achieving that. And that's why, choosing your measures is really important. And, if you, I've ended up going into businesses that have chosen to measure everything that moves, and that's just a waste of time because nobody knows what the priority is. But if the success measure for the next 3 months is to get that contract signed, you've got no data points. So what you need to do is you need to just at a very high level, just break down the milestones on the way to achieving that contract. So, have we have we got to a point where we've got heads of agreement? Have we got to so on and so forth? And just
yeah,
say, just imagine that contract signature is 100%. What does 80%, 60%, 40%, 20% progress all look like? So you've got that transparency and you can see how you're progressing towards it. So three types of measures, milestones if you've got no data, leading and lagging if you have. Okay,
mm,
and that's really important to understand where to deploy, and those are what we would call really good for use as key results. You mentioned OKRs, objectives, and key results is a big part of our methodology, and we find that they're really really good for uh, clearly illustrating, take that again, go back to that Google will get it working in 3 months. They will have defined that as an objective and a key result. Our objective is this. This is our mission for the next 3 months. Oh, and by the way, we're going to judge success by seeing whether we've achieved X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's the that's the structure to an OKR. What they're not there to do is to run the business. Okay,
Yeah,
they're not about making sure that the business is healthy. They're not about making sure that the business is necessarily getting invoices paid on time and that cash flow is working. That's key performance indicators. That's the
yeah,
difference. Okay, so there is a difference between the two. They're both measures of performance, right? But
yeah,
one is far more transactional, and one is
yes,
far more transformational.
and strategic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Sometimes you may find a KPI come over into an OKR because it needs that focus, because perhaps invoices are taking too long to get paid and cash flow is a problem. In which case it needs focus for a given period of time. Fine. But once it's back on track and it's green, get it out of there because it's taking up valuable bandwidth for that transformation, for that
that's
growth.
a good point. Just to pivot, if you like, one of our friend's favourite words, not, but I'm going to use it anyway. Um, Obviously, all the business stuff, great. You obviously also have two lovely dogs, Jake and Molly, both Staffordshire Bulls, with a one with a little bit of extra in. I think we can see them over
One of
there.
them, she's
One
looking
of
at
them
at the
is that
moment.
Molly.
That's Molly at the back there. Yes.
Um, so, where are you sort of seeing? You go into a veterinary practice. You don't need to name the practice, but how effective do you think it's doing its role? How are you sort of looking at the veterinary profession, one as a business person, but also one as a pet parent, somebody with an owner of a dog of two dogs.
Really interesting that you ask, Anthony. I mean, my perception of the practice which I use, and I was only just there last night with my other dog Jake, who is snoring his head off. I don't know if you can pick that up, but maybe not.
Get the
Is he,
podcast mic down to him.
he's on Librella, so he goes in
Yes,
every month for his injections, and he was in there last night. Um, they are part of a big national chain. I won't say which one, but they are fantastic actually, and they're not cheap by the slightest, right?
yeah,
But they have invested in the facilities there. Only in the last 6 months, they've actually had a complete refit and everything, and they opened it all up, had the guest had clients in to show around and so on and so
yeah,
forth. So you get to see what's behind the consulting rooms, which you're
yeah,
always
yeah.
thinking, what's behind that door, and
Yes,
you got to see all that, and that's made me feel like it's worth paying for, if you see what I
yeah,
mean. Okay. Um, I wonder what the experience would be like if I was still if I was at an independent. I know there are a few independents around here. I don't know. I don't know if my experience would be any different. Where I, being that Jake's 14 and Molly's 13, where in terms of the two of them and the whole sort of animal healthcare equation, where I'm feeling the pain is in the insurance payments because
yeah.
it's absolutely ludicrous, and I think it's borderline anti-competitive for the fact that you can't switch really now, because if you did, all the prior conditions would be excluded. So they really do have you by the short and curlers. And I feel resentful for that. I really
It's
do.
probably the same in human um,
Yeah,
medical
in human
insurance as well,
it is.
isn't it? Once you are an issue, or as you get older, they're desperate to get rid of you by really hiking the premiums, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They are. They are. And I tried to increase the cover for Molly last year, and they refused. They said, you
Yeah.
can keep it at this level. Um, but it is
It's
what it is.
interesting because I think um, this has been a perennial problem. Most vets are really caring individuals, want to do what they can,
Yeah,
don't want costs to be something that stops people. So we always have different options depending on what people can afford. But I think we all get a bit obsessed with cost rather than talking about value. And I go and see a chiropractor once a month or so, and I'm in there for about 10 minutes. It's £45, and there's very little equipment there. Nice guy, does a good job, etc. But he doesn't have a radiograph. He doesn't have an X-ray machine. He doesn't have anaesthesia in the practice. He doesn't have places where people can stay for the day if they need to. And
Yeah,
stainless steel cages cost a lot of money. It's actually a very expensive business to run. So to actually make a profit is challenging. And obviously, most people just see the bill at the end of the day and don't understand how it's broken down. But I think it is about showing value, and that was a great example where they let you
yeah,
into the back so you could see the facilities and what was available there.
yeah, very much so. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I do, like I said, I feel like it's worth paying. Yeah, it is expensive. I think all vets are expensive now, but I can appreciate the value of them going there. And funnily enough, I'm actually considering a house move, and I've thought if I move out of the area, I'm still going to come back here with
Yeah,
them.
brilliant.
Yeah,
And that's the thing. It's interesting, and I don't know whether it's changed, but often when you look at trust categories for various professions, estate agents fairly low on the list, politicians, probably at the same sort of level,
yeah,
but actually pharmacists, opticians, and vets are always very high on the list because I think people on the whole do trust their vets. Uh, Albeit, we can't take that sort of trust for granted, and you can lose trust very easily, can't you, as well?
you can, you can, you can. Yeah. No, I think I have 100% trust in mine. I see the same guy each time. He's been
Yeah,
looking after my two for the past 6 or 7 years, and that was he only took over because the lady beforehand, which I saw consistently, she retired, and he's one of the partners in the practice as well. And yeah, I have no issues with him, and I appreciate again value is in the consistency. He knows the
yeah,
dogs, and um, and my two presented a few challenges along the way. I thought I was going to have to lose her in summer because she was having a really bad period of very very distressed behaviour, for which there was no reason. It suddenly happened and it suddenly started, and it was quite concerning. But he was with me through it, and eventually we found a solution which has given her the comfort that she needed. And as you can see, she's she's anything
yeah,
but distressed now.
yeah. She doesn't look too stressed.
No, no, not at all, not at all.
Oh
So
well, I'm so pleased she's got through that
mm,
issue and still doing well. They are a very important part of the family, aren't they? The family pets.
they are hugely. They are my anchors in life in many
Yeah,
respects.
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah,
can't we can't quite do the mountains like we used to, but I had them up in the Lake District the week before last, and they still managed a 4.5 mile walk from Ambleside to Grasmere, which particularly for him at 14, I was very very
yeah.
pleased, very pleased with.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Roger, thanks so much. I think just to sort of finish off, it is that importance of measuring, but don't analysis by paralysis is the other side of the problem, isn't it? If you do too much, it's analyzing the right things at the right time, and don't be afraid of changing what you're measuring as well.
yeah. I think I absolutely. I think just to expand on that a little bit, I would say think about your endpoint and your waypoints.
Yeah,
Don't get obsessed about planning every single step. Right, the old
yeah,
days of if people remember Prince 2 as a project methodology, fine. It still works in construction. That's fine. That's a different ball game and big,
yeah,
capital projects. But if you're running a business, nah, no, don't. You need to be far more agile. So your endpoint, your waypoints, get detailed, but only in the very very near term,
yeah,
and then be really fanatical about where you choose to focus that spotlight, because and deploy your measures, because that's what will draw people's attention, and focus. So make sure that you're measuring the right things that either show you're on the right track, or that they are genuinely a measure of, they're genuinely a result, an outcome. Okay.
Yeah.
That, and just to finish off, that's defining the difference between or getting clients to get their head around what the difference is between an output and an outcome is often
Yeah.
quite a challenge. And because it really requires them to get super honest about whether they're just ticking something off on a list and feeling good because they think it's been completed, or
Yeah.
or being honest about, well, you've ticked that off, but what's that delivered? What's that enabled? What's that done for you? Those are the difficult questions, which are the difference between an output and an outcome.
Roger, thank you so much. It's been great to speak to you.
Oh,
I
my
know
pleasure.
also you're a podcaster, so maybe we can swap
Yes,
over at some
I'm
point as
sure. I'm
well.
sure we will. I'm sure we will. Yes. My pod is called Giant Talk. It, as I said, we use OKRs extensively within our methodology, and it was, in fact, I started it back in 2019, and it was the world's first OKR podcast.
Yeah.
So there's best part of a couple of hundred episodes in the back catalogue now, so
Yeah.
people can go and take their pick. Almost use it like a bit of a wiki on OKRs if they're looking at them. But yes, we'd love to get you on.
And of course, I often get stopped at conferences, particularly as we move out of the pandemic, and people say they didn't realise I was quite as tall as I am. At nearly 2 meters for those still measuring imperially, 6 foot
Yeah.
6.5. And you're not that far behind me, are you?
No, I'm 6'5", and I think that's why I gravitated over to talk to you, because I said, "Well, I don't have to bend down, do I?"
Good man. Listen, Roger, great to speak to you.
All right, my pleasure, Anthony.
And thanks everyone for listening. And hopefully see you on a podcast or a webinar very soon. Take care and have a great rest of the day.
Take care.
Bye
Cheers
bye.
now.